Imagine the following scene. You are in your own home, trying to raise your children with love and respect, when suddenly someone decides to know more about your family than yourself. This is not a fictional story, it is the reality of thousands of mothers who face the invasion of boundaries by mother-in-law who believe themselves owners of absolute truth. And today I want to share with you an account that will make you rethink how far family interference can reach when there is no mutual respect. It all started when my husband, Igor, had to travel to work for 2 weeks. Normally, his mother, Ludmila Mikhailovna, behaved with some restraint in his presence. But as soon as he crossed the door, it was as if a mask fell. The polite woman gave way to an authoritarian figure, determined to impose her rules at any cost. That Monday morning, she appeared in our apartment with a huge bag and stated, without asking permission, that would help with the children while Igor was out. My children, Dennis, 7 and would have 5, had coffee before school and kindergarten. I today thanked it, but I made it clear that I didn't need help. She simply ignored my words and went straight to the kitchen, as if my opinion had no value. In the early days, things gradually deteriorated. Ludmila criticized my food, rearranged the cabinets, made acid comments about the organization of the house. I swallowed dry, thinking, it's just 2 weeks, I can handle it. But the real problem began when she decided that she had the right to dictate how my children should be educated. On Wednesday night, Dennis came home with a low note in math. Calmly, I explained where he was wrong, we rejected the exercise together and agreed that the next day he would try again. For me, the important thing was that he understood the content, not that it was punished by the error. Ludmila didn't like it at all. In my day, it was in sponsors by low grade. You are creating a weak, he said, as if humiliation was synonymous with education. When I argued that the constructive approach gives better results, she just wrinkled her nose and spent the rest of the night muttering modern mothers who don't know how to put limits. The next day, the situation climbed. Doria would refuse to eat the baby food that her grandmother had prepared, something she always hated, and everyone in the family knew it. Ludmila, however, decided that this was the perfect time to teach a lesson. Eat what's on the plate or have dinner, he ordered, as if it were a matter of principles and not respecting the preferences of a small child. When I tried to explain that she had aversion to that food and offered to make an omelette, Ludmila was exalted. You're spoiling this girl. In real life, no one will make omelette just because she made a tantrum. Doria began to cry, and I hugged her as my mother-in-law stared at me with a hatred that seemed to grow every second. But the worst was yet to come. On Friday, after Dennis finished the homework, he took his tablet to play something we agreed with Igor, an hour of fun after the obligations. Ludmila tore off the device from his hands with a violence that made me terrified. Enough of these nonsense. Take a book and read, he shouted, as if we were committing a crime. Dennis, confused, asked her back, and I intervened. He fulfilled the agreed, Ludmila. An hour of play won't ruin his life. The answer? A look of pure contempt. Do you want him to turn a zombie? Passing all day looking at screens? When I reaffirmed that we, as parents, set these rules, it was exhaustive. While I'm here, things will be my way. I'm the grandmother and I know what is best for them. From there, the coexistence became unbearable. Ludmila spent the weekend Nando every decision of mine, criticizing every attitude, as if his mission were to prove that I was an incompetent mother. The result? My children, once happy and safe, began to give clear signs of stress. Doria, who never had speech problems, started stuttering. Dennis, always communicative, closed himself in himself. It was like watching the collapse of their emotional security right in front of me. On Sunday morning, I tried to talk in particular. Ludmila, we need to find a middle ground. The children are suffering from this constant tension, he said, seeking a conciliatory tone. Your answer? They suffer because you don't know how to educate. No discipline, no rules, just mimicry. When I explained that our discipline was based on dialogue, not impositions, she laughed with sarcasm. Dialogue? In my time, child respected the elders without questioning. And look how stronger people were. The fuse came on Monday night. It would give, distracted while drawing on the kitchen table, unintentionally knocked a glass of water. Nothing serious, a banal accident that any child would commit. But Ludmilla exploded like the end of the world. Once again making a mess. How many times have I have to say to be careful, he shouted, scaring my daughter. While I cleaned the water and reassured, no problem, honey, next time it takes more care, Ludmilla lost control. Is that how to educate yourself? Without consequences? Does it need to be punished to learn? Punished why? I asked incredulously. Because it is careless. For not paying attention. When I explained that children are naturally clumsy and that there was no malice in that gesture, she went further, you are spoiling it. So she thinks he is entitled to do what she wants. I would cry in my arms, and I tried to calm her down while Ludmilla demanded that the girl be put in the corner. This will not happen. She did nothing wrong, I said firmly. It was then that she crossed the irreparable line. I am the grandmother and you have to obey me. The discussion was getting too ugly, and the children, already shaken, did not need to witness that. I asked us to leave the conversation for later, when they were sleeping. But Ludmilla didn't go back. Let's argue right now. Shut up and don't tell me how to create my grandchildren. The sentence hurt like a stab. I felt the anger boil inside me, but I tried to control myself. This is my house, and I ask you not to scream in front of the children. Your answer was a bitter and poisonous smile. Your house? My son paid for her. You're just a guest here. It was the drop of water. Enough, Ludmilla. Get out of my kitchen. I need to calm my children, I ordered, with a trembling voice of containment. She advanced towards me, her injected eyes with fury. Your kitchen? He repeated, as if the word offended her. And then, before Dennis's terrified eyes would give, she did something that I never imagined that a grandmother was capable. She lifted her hand and slapped me on her face. The world stopped. I would do sobbing desperately in my arms. Dennis shouted, paralyzed of terror. And I, with my face burning, stared at that woman who, in a second, had destroyed any remnants of respect that I could still have for her. That gesture was not just an aggression against me, it was violence against the security of my family, against the love I was trying to build every day. At that moment, I knew that some things have no return. And when it comes to protecting your children, there is no room for negotiation. I put Doria softly on the floor, turned to Ludmilla Mikhailovna and said quietly but with clarity that cut like blades. Just beating a mother, in front of her children, inside her own home, for defending the children of their aggressions. She stammered, trying to justify herself, I didn't want to. But there was no excuse to erase that gesture. You have surpassed all the limit. Take your things and get out of my house. Now. Her eyes widened, as if only she understood the gravity of what she had done. But I'm going to. I'm leaving. I didn't wait. I took Dennis and Doria by the hand and took them to the living room, away from that poison. They cried, their shoulders shaking, the red faces of fear and confusion. I squeezed them against me, whispering that everything would look good, that Mom was there, that no one else would scare them. Meanwhile, the noises of the kitchen echoed as hammered. She joined her things with trembling hands, the hurry of who knows that there is no return. 20 minutes later, he appeared at the door of the room with a bag hanging on his shoulder. The face, formerly circumvented by the fury, was now a mask of despair. I rushed. Let's forget that, please. I looked at her in the eyes, firm as steel. No. Get out. But the kids, my grandchildren. You should have thought of them before raising your hand to their mother. She tried to say something more, but my finger pointed to the way out was enough response. The door knocked behind her with a final snap. The whole night was devoted to rebuilding what she had destroyed in seconds. I told stories until the voices of the little ones get sleepy. I prepared their favorite dishes as if they were an antidote against fear, played until the laughs, even forced, would echo again around the house. But I saw in their eyes that the scar was there. Dennis, who once ran to hug his grandmother, now shrank to the smallest higher noise. Derry, who loved to draw for her, hid the pencils as if they were dangerous weapons. Before bedtime, Dennis looked at me with seriousness that did not fit in her 7 years. Mother, Grandma won't hurt us anymore? I squeezed his small hand on mine. No, my son. Never again. And then, with the cruel innocence of the children, And will not be angry because you sent her away? I smiled, even with the knot in the throat. Dad loves us and protects us. He will understand. The next day, while the children were at school and daycare, the bell sounded like a warning. I opened the door and there was Lyudmila Mikhailovna, kneeling in the building's hallway, tears sulcating the compacted dust in the linoleum, the makeup blurred as an abstract painting of repentance. Forgive me, please. I don't know what you gave me. I've never hit anyone, I swear. The neighbors spied through the cracks of the doors, eager for drama, but I only saw a broken woman, confronting the weight of her own hands. Get up, Lyudmila Mikhailovna. Entra. She obeyed, wiping her face with her back, the words coming out between sobs. I didn't sleep all night. I know I've been wrong. You're a good mother, I always knew that. I just thought that I was doing the best. I sat at the kitchen table, indicating the chair in front of you. The best does not include violence. No screams. No humiliation. She lowered her head. I'm afraid Igor hates me when he knows. Fear that you never let me see my grandchildren again. I looked at her fixed. And yesterday, when you hit me, did you think about it? The silence that followed was a confession. It was angry. I thought you were creating weak, that they needed to be harder. Lyudmila Mikhailovna, let's leave something clear. In this family, the rules of education are decided by me and Igor. You can give your opinion, with respect, without impositions, but the last word is ours. She nodded, her fingers twisting the scarf until he gets wet. I understand. Yesterday it wasn't just you who hurt, it was them. They saw me do that. The tears came back, stronger. My God, what did I do? If she really regretted, she had to prove it. If you really want to be forgiven, never, never will be repeated. No screams, no hands raised, without trying to dictate how things work here. I swear. I promise. Well. So let's try to rebuild it, slowly. And under my supervision. She accepted, as who grabs a lifeguard after almost drowning. 3 days later, Igor returned from the work trip. I told you everything. At first he didn't believe it, my mother. Never, until I showed the security camera images at the entrance, which had captured enough. The push, the slap, the frozen horror-frozen face. The air came out of his lungs as if he had taken the blow. The dialogue that followed between mother and son was the hardest I have ever witnessed. Igor, always the mediator, for the first time has traced a line in the sand. If that happens again, you are no longer part of our life. Lyudmila Mikhailovna heard in silence, her trembling lips, knowing that this was her last chance. In the following months, she moved like the one who stepped on eggs. It arrived only when invited, spoke low, played with the children with an almost shy sweetness. Dennis, cautiously, accepted his hugs without much approaching. Derry, more resilient, he showed her the drawings again, but no longer with the same enthusiasm. Gradually, the tension dissipated like fog in the sun, but the shadow of that day remained in Dennis's eyes, who still widened to the smallest tone higher, in the attitude of Doria, which now observed adults with early skepticism. 2 years passed. Lyudmila Mikhailovna was never alone with the children in the absence of Igor. He remembered that day when he was on his knees, pleading, and knew that a second mistake would be the end. The children grew up. Dennis, a brilliant student with a discipline that looked like armor. Derry, dipped in their watercolors, where the colors were safer than the words. They were educated with their grandmother, but the intimacy of before, that blind confidence of children who love without reserve, never returned. Perhaps the memory of that slap, that scream, has been nestled in some corner of his minds, as a lesson no book could teach. As for me, I learned that protecting a family sometimes requires teeth on display. Lyudmila Mikhailovna now asks me for opinion before suggesting anything to the children. Asks permission before buying gifts, as if each gesture needed to be approved. Finally, it understood that authority is not built with fear, but with respect, and that it is achieved with actions, not with impositions. Igor also changed. It was no longer the son who closed his eyes to the conflicts between mother and wife, assuming his role as a shield. My priority is to protect you and your children, he told me one night after a tense conversation with his mother. If she doesn't understand that, to be outside. This clarity was a balm. Sometimes I still find myself thinking that day, in her kneeling image, crying, and in the weight of those seconds when I decided not to give in. I didn't feel triumph at that time, I felt sorry. Pity of a woman who only understood the value of what she had when she was on the verge of losing him. But pity is not weakness. I forgive, yes, but the borders remained untouchable. And that made all the difference. Today, when I look back, I see that this conflict was inevitable. Lyudmila Mikhailovna had spent her entire life as the uncontested matriarch, and suddenly she had to divide the space with another woman, this woman who didn't bow to her wishes. He needed that seismic shake to understand that the times were different, that his voice was now just one of many. Children no longer talk about that day, but I see in them a keen sensitivity to unfair caution that, although sad, can be an armor. It may not be bad that they have learned early that love does not justify everything, that there are lines that, once crossed, change everything forever. Last week, Lyudmila Mikhailovna confessed me, with a trembling voice, that day was the greatest learning of her life. I ceased to hear, not only to speak, he said. To understand that being a grandmother is not having power, it is to have responsibility. I don't know if it's sincerity or fear of repeat the story. But in the end, it matters little. What counts is that, in our house, respect is not negotiable, and this is a legacy that is worth leaving for Dennis and Doria. The peace we have now is not perfect. There are still tensions, misunderstandings, scars that scratch from time to time. But it is an honest peace, built on difficult truths and brave choices. And in the end, this is what makes a family not only survive but flourish.